They said a barren Luna could never carry a miracle. They said two rival alpha kings would tear each other apart before sharing the same heart. They said the long schism, 1,000 years of blood and hate, could never be healed. They were wrong, but what if the child born to end the war was also the one destined to start a darker one? One night, one storm, one forbidden touch that broke every law of moon and crown. Now the dawn-bearer is here, and something ancient is already hunting the light in his eyes. Would you betray everything you love to protect a future that might destroy the world? Keep watching, because the real war begins the moment the crying stops. You won't look away. Yeesh, you can't, not when the ending hasn't decided who survives it yet. In the shadowed realms where werewolf packs thrive under the eternal gaze of the moon, Alara's story unfolds like a whispered legend. As Luna to her pack's alpha, she bore the weight of infertility, a silent curse that eroded her spirit, leaving her adrift in a sea of unfulfilled longing. One fateful night, driven by despair, she encounters an enigmatic stranger in the storm-lashed woods, their union a blaze of unintended passion. Unknown to her, he is the Alpha King, and from that clandestine night blooms a miracle, pregnancy. But destiny weaves deeper threads. The moon goddess has chosen her, transforming her pain into a divine purpose where love, betrayal, and redemption entwine in a tapestry of fate. The infertile Luna slept with an Alpha King unknowingly and got pregnant. Turns out to be a moon goddess choice. Chapter 1. Shadows of the Silent Moon. The full moon hung low in the velvet sky, casting a silvery glow over the dense forest that bordered the Silver Fang Pack's territory. Elara stood at the edge of the clearing, her bare feet sinking into the cool, damp earth. The air was thick with the scent of pine and wildflowers, mingled with the distant howls of her kin celebrating the lunar rite. But for Elara, the Luna of the pack, the night brought no joy, only a hollow ache that echoed through her soul. At 28, Elara was a vision of ethereal beauty, long, raven hair cascading like midnight waves down her back, eyes the color of storm clouds, and a lithe frame honed by years of running with the pack. Yet beneath that grace lay a fracture no one could mend. Infertility, the word slithered through, her mind like a venomous serpent, poisoning every dream she dared to hold. She had been mated to Alpha Thorn for 5 years now, their bond sealed under the same moon that now mocked her. Thorn, with his broad shoulders, piercing green eyes, and commanding presence, was everything a Luna could desire. He loved her, or so he claimed, but the absence of an heir gnawed at him, widening the chasm between them. Elara? Thorn's voice had rumbled earlier that evening, laced with frustration as he paced their spacious cabin. The elders are pressing again. We need an heir to secure the pack's future. Without one, he trailed off, his gaze avoiding hers. But the implication hung heavy. Without one, her position as Luna was precarious. Packs thrived on legacy, on the promise of continuation. Whispers had already begun, subtle at first, like leaves rustling in the wind, but growing bolder. Perhaps the moon goddess has other plans, some said. Or perhaps she's not the true Luna. Tears stung Alara's eyes as she wandered deeper into the woods, away from the flickering bonfires and laughter of the rite. The other she-wolves, swollen with pregnancy or chasing after playful pups, embodied the life she craved. She could almost feel the phantom weight of a child in her arms, the soft warmth of tiny fingers clutching hers. But doctors, human and pack healers alike, had shaken their heads. It's impossible, they'd said. Your womb is barren. Each diagnosis was a dagger twisting deeper. The forest enveloped her like an old friend, branches whispering secrets as she shifted into her wolf form, for the color of polished obsidian rippled over her skin, and she bounded forward, paused silent on the leaf-strewn path. Running always cleared her mind, the wind whipping through her coat a temporary balm for the storm within. Tonight, though, a real storm brewed on the horizon, dark clouds rolling in, thunder growling like an angry beast.
Before we continue, kindly tell us where you are watching from, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button, because every day we have an amazing story that will make your day.
She didn't know how far she'd run when the rain began, fat drops pelting her fur. Lightning cracked the sky, illuminating a figure ahead, a massive wolf, larger than any she'd seen, with fur as dark as the void and eyes glowing like embers. He shifted seamlessly into human form, standing tall and unyielding against the torrent. Broad-chested, with chiseled features etched in shadow, he exuded an aura of raw power that made her inner wolf whimper in submission. Who are you? Elara shifted back, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. Water streamed down her face, soaking her simple tunic and leggings. The stranger's gaze locked onto hers, intense and unreadable, as if he could see straight into her fractured heart. "A wanderer," he replied, his voice a deep timbre that resonated through the rain. "Caught in the storm. Like you." There was something magnetic about him, a pull that defied logic. The air crackled with energy. The moon's light pierced in the clouds, just enough to bathe them in an otherworldly sheen. Alara should have turned away, returned her pack to Thorn, but the loneliness clawed at her, amplified by the night's isolation. "The right is that way," she said, pointing vaguely. "You could find shelter there." He stepped closer, the heat from his body cutting through the chill. "And you? Why aren't you with them?" His question hung between them, probing. A sob caught in her throat, but she swallowed it. I needed space." The truth spilled out unbidden, perhaps drawn by the anonymity of the storm. "I'm the Luna, but I can't. I can't give them what they need, an heir. It's like a curse from the goddess herself." His expression softened, a flicker of understanding in those fiery eyes. "The moon goddess doesn't curse without reason. Sometimes she tests us to reveal our strength." He reached out, his hand brushing her arm, sending sparks dancing across her skin. It was electric, forbidden, the touch of a stranger igniting something dormant within her. They sought refuge in a nearby cave, the entrance hidden by overhanging vines. Inside, the rain's roar dulled to a murmur, the space lit by faint bioluminescent fungi clinging to the walls. Alara shivered, not from cold, but from the proximity of this man whose name she didn't even know. He built a small fire with scavenged wood, his movements efficient and graceful. As the flames danced, casting shadows that played across his sculpted form, she felt a warmth unfurl in her core, a desire she hadn't known in months. "Tell me more," he urged, sitting close enough that their knees touched. His scent, musk and earth, laced with something regal, enveloped her. Alara poured out her heart, the failed rituals, the pack's growing discontent, Thorn's subtle withdrawal. Tears flowed freely now, mingling with the dampness on her cheeks. He listened without judgment, his hand eventually finding hers. "You're not broken," he murmured, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "You're luminous." The word hung in the air, charged. In that moment, under the storm's symphony, barriers crumbled. She leaned in, her lips brushing his in a tentative kiss that ignited like dry tinder. What followed was a whirlwind of passion, raw and unscripted. His hands roamed her body with reverence, peeling away sodden clothes to reveal skin flushed with need. Alara gasped as he trailed kisses down her neck, his touch awakening sensation she'd long suppressed. "Let go," he whispered against her ear, his voice a command wrapped in velvet. She did, arching into him, their bodies merging in a rhythm that echoed the thunder outside. It was intense, almost primal, the slide of skin on skin, the build of tension coiling tighter until release shattered her like lightning. In his arms, she felt whole, desired, alive. As the storm subsided, guilt crashed over her like a wave. She dressed hurriedly, avoiding his gaze. This was a mistake," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I have a mate, a pack." He watched her, expression unreadable. Sometimes, mistakes are fate's design. But she fled into the fading rain, her heart pounding, unaware that the seeds of change had been sown. Back at the cabin, Thorn was waiting, his face etched with worry. "Where were you?" "The storm." He pulled her into an embrace, but she stiffened, the stranger's scent lingering faintly on her skin. "I'm fine," she lied, forcing a smile. Inside, turmoil raged, shame for her betrayal, confusion over the night's events, and a spark of something new, hope or dread. Days blurred into weeks. Alara threw herself into pack duties, organizing hunts and mediating disputes, all while ignoring the nausea that plagued her mornings. Thorn noticed her pallor, attributing it to stress. "We'll figure this out," he said one evening, his hand on her shoulder, a gesture that once brought comfort but now felt distant. It was during a routine healer's visit that the truth emerged. The elder she-wolf, Mira, pressed her hands to Alara's abdomen, her eyes widening. "Moon goddess preserve us," Mira breathed. "You're with child." Alara's world tilted. "Impossible." "The tests." "Miracles happen," Mira replied, a knowing smile tugging at her lips. Joy surged through Alara, mingled with terror. "How? The stranger?" But who was he? As she placed a hand on her still flat belly, a flutter responded, a tiny life defying all odds. That night, under the waning moon, Alara dreamed of the goddess, a luminous figure with eyes like stars. "Borihad, you are chosen, my daughter," the vision whispered. "The child you carry will bridge worlds." Waking with a start, Alara felt a profound shift. Her infertility wasn't a curse, it was a prelude to destiny. But questions loomed. Who was the father? And what would Thorn say when the truth surfaced? As dawn broke, Alara resolved to uncover the stranger's identity, unaware that he was no mere wanderer, but the Alpha King himself, drawn to her by the goddess's invisible threads. Chapter 2: Whispers of the Hidden King. Alara stood on the wooden porch of the healer's cabin, one trembling hand pressed to her belly, the other clutching the doorframe as if the world might tilt and spill her into the void. Mira's words still rang in her ears. You are with child. A miracle. A lie. A secret already growing teeth. The late autumn wind carried the scent of wood smoke and frost. Somewhere in the village square, pups laughed and chased each other while their mothers called them in for supper. Ordinary sounds. Sounds that belonged to a life she had thought forever close to her. Now every laugh felt like an accusation. She closed her eyes and saw him again, the stranger in the cave, firelight licking across the hard plains of his chest, his mouth hot against her throat, the way he had whispered her name like a prayer and a command all at once. Lucian. She didn't know that yet, but her body did. Her wolf did, they remembered. Footsteps crunched on the gravel path. Thorn. Her mate moved like the forest itself, silent, inevitable. Even without looking, she felt the weight of his presence, the way the air shifted when an alpha was near. She straightened, smoothed the worry from her face, and turned. Thorn's green eyes searched hers. Mira sent word. She said. He swallowed, the proud column of his throat working. She said it's true. Alara's heart cracked open. She had rehearsed 100 ways to tell him, gentle lies, half-truths, tearful confessions, but none of them survived the raw hope shining in his face. Thorn, He crossed the distance in 2 strides and dropped to his knees in front of her, pressing his forehead to her still flat stomach as though he could already hear the tiny heartbeat inside. His huge hands, capable of snapping a rogue's neck, trembled as they cradled her hips. "A goddess, Alara," he whispered, voice rough with unshed tears. "A pup, our pup." Guilt sliced her so cleanly she almost gasped aloud. Our pup, if only it were that simple. She threaded her fingers through his dark gold hair, the familiar silk of it anchoring her even as everything else spun away. "I didn't think it was possible," she managed. "The truth, at least in part." Thorn rose slowly, cupping her face. "All those years I failed you." His voice cracked. "I should have protected you from the whispers, from the elders, from my own damned impatience. I thought I was losing you." He brushed his thumb across her lower lip, the gesture achingly tender. "Tonight I'm getting you back." Before she could protest, he swept her into his arms and carried her home through the twilight. The pack members they passed lifted their heads, nostrils flaring, eyes widening with the first delicious hint of gossip. The Luna carried the scent of new life. Inside their cabin, Thorn kicked the door shut and set her down only long enough to light the hearth. Firelight spilled across the furs on their bed, across the walls hung with pelts from hunts they'd run together. He turned to her, and the look in his eyes stole her breath. Hunger, reverence, apology, love, all braided together. "I need to feel you," he said, voice low. "Need to know this is real." Ilara's pulse thundered in her ears. She should tell him. She should stop this, but the guilt and the joy and the terror were too tangled, and his hands were already sliding under her sweater, calloused palms gliding up her spine. And goddess help her, she wanted to feel wanted, just for tonight. Thorn kissed her like a man drowning. Slow, desperate, thorough. He peeled her clothes away with the same reverence he'd once shown on their mating night, lips following every inch of revealed skin. When he reached the faint bruise on the curve of her neck left by another man, he paused, nostrils flaring. For one terrifying heartbeat she thought he smelled the truth, but he only growled, possessive and soft, and covered the mark with his own mouth, sucking gently until her knees buckled. He lifted her later on the furs and worshipped her body with hands and tongue until she was trembling, begging, tears leaking from the corners of her eyes because it felt so good and so wrong at the same time. When he finally sank into her, it was with a broken groan that sounded like gratitude. They moved together in the firelight, her nails scoring his back, his teeth grazing her shoulder. Every thrust a promise, "I choose you. I choose you. I choose you." She shattered first, crying out his name, and he followed moments later, burying his face in her neck as he spilled inside her, marking her in the oldest way wolves knew. Afterward, he held her close, one large hand splayed protectively over her belly. "Whatever comes," he murmured against her temple, "we face it together. You, me, and our pup. I swear it on the moon." Ilara pressed her face into his chest so he wouldn't see the tears soaking his skin. Hours later, when Thorn slept deeply, exhausted and content, Ilara slipped from the bed. Moonlight striped the floorboard silver. She padded barefoot to the window, wrapping Thorn's shirt around her like armor. On the sill lay a single white raven feather, impossibly perfect, tied with a thin silver thread. No bird in these woods had feathers like that. Her fingers shook as she unfolded the tiny scrap of parchment attached. You carry more than you know, little moon. Guard it well. I am closer than you think. The letters were written in a bold, elegant hand she had never seen yet somehow recognized in her bones. Outside, the forest was silent except for the low, distant howl of a lone wolf, too deep, too powerful to belong to any member of Silver Fang. Ilara clutched the note to her racing heart and stared into the dark, certain that somewhere out there, golden eyes were staring back. Chapter 3, Echoes of Forbidden Desire. The white raven feather lay on the table like a shard of moonlight that refused to melt. Ilara hadn't slept. She sat wrapped in Thorn's shirt, knees drawn to her chest, staring at the single letter L until the lines blurred. Every time she closed her eyes, she was back in the cave, rain drumming on stone, firelight licking across bronze skin, a voice like velvet thunder saying her name in a way that made her soul arch like a cat. She hated how vividly she remembered the weight of his hands, the exact pressure of his mouth at the hollow beneath her ear, the way he had looked at her. Not with pity for the barren Luna, but with hunger for the woman she was underneath the title. A soft kick fluttered low in her belly. Tiny, insistent, real. The pup sensed her turmoil and answered with reassurance she didn't deserve. Outside, dawn bled pale gold across the frost. Thorn stirred in the bed behind her, reaching instinctively for the place she was supposed to be. When his hand met only cool sheets, he sat up, hair tousled, eyes sharpening with alpha alertness. Ilara? She turned too quickly, knocking the feather to the floor. It spun once, impossibly slow before settling like a secret trying to hide. Thorn's gaze tracked it. What is that? Nothing. Her voice cracked on the lie. She bent and snatched it up, clutching it against her chest, as if the soft vein could shield her heart. Just something the wind blew in. He rose, gloriously naked and unself-conscious, and crossed the room in 3 silent strides. The morning light carved shadows along the ridges of muscle she had kissed only hours ago. He stopped just short of touching her, reading the tremor in her shoulders the way he once read enemy movements on a battlefield. You're shaking, he said quietly. I'm cold, she lied again. He didn't believe her. She saw it in the flicker of green. But Thorn had always been careful with her fractures. Instead of pressing, he wrapped his arms around her from behind, pulling her back against the furnace of his chest. His palms settled low on her stomach, protective, possessive, tender. The pup kicked again, harder this time, as though greeting the wrong father. Ilara's breath hitched. Thorn felt it. His arms tightened. Talk to me, love. I betrayed you in a cave while the sky tore itself apart and now the storm is inside me. The words clawed up her throat and died there. I'm scared, she whispered instead. Truth, but only a sliver. Everything is changing so fast, the pack, the elders, this pup. I'm terrified I won't be enough. Thorn turned her gently, cupping her face so she had to meet his eyes. You are everything, Ilara. You always were. The rest is just noise. He kissed her forehead, lingering, breathing her in. For a moment she let herself sink into the familiar safety of him, the scent of pine and steel, the steady drum of his heart against her cheek. She wanted to stay there forever, wrapped in the lie that this child could belong to the life they had planned. But the feather burned against her palm like a brand. All day she carried the weight of 2 heartbeats and 1 impossible truth. She smiled when pack members congratulated her, accepted their joyful hugs, let the she-wolves press eager hands to her belly and coo over the miracle Luna. Each touch felt like judgment. Each delighted laugh scraped her raw. By dusk she was fraying. Thorn was called to the border. Scouts reporting strange tracks, too large, circling but never crossing. He kissed her hard before leaving, a silent promise to return soon. The cabin felt too big once he was gone, the silence pressing in until her skin buzzed. She fled to the one place the pack rarely went after dark, the sacred moon pool at the heart of the forest. The water lay black and glassy under the rising moon, reflecting a perfect silver circle. Ilara sank to her knees on the mossy bank, the feather clutched so tightly the quill pricked her thumb, a bead of blood welled, dark as betrayal. I didn't ask for this, she said to the moon, voice breaking. I didn't ask to be broken, and then remade like this. Take it back if it's going to destroy him. Take the gift if the price is his heart. The surface of the pool rippled though there was no wind. She felt him before she heard him, power rolling ahead like thunder you sense in your bones. Lucian stepped from the tree line as though the shadows themselves birthed him. Moonlight spilled over him, gilding the sharp cut of cheekbones, the unforgiving line of his mouth. He wore only dark trousers, feet bare, chest bare, the sculpted muscle she remembered under her palms now painted silver in starlight. Elara's breath left her in a rush. Every inch of her skin remembered him, traitorous and alive. "You shouldn't be here," she said, but it came out a plea more than a warning. "I never left." His voice was the same low thunder that still haunted her dreams. He did not move closer, yet the air between them thickened, charged, humming like the moment before lightning strikes. "I felt you call me." "I didn't." "You did. One step, only one, but it closed half the world. Across miles, across bloodlines, across the lie you're trying to live." His gaze dropped to her belly and something fierce and reverent softened the hard angles of his face. "He grows strong." She surged to her feet, anger flaring to cover the ache. Don't you dare speak of him as if he's mine," Lucian finished softly. The words hung between them, beautiful and ruinous. Lara's knees nearly buckled. Hearing it spoken aloud made it real, in a way even the kicks inside her had not. Lucian's eyes, molten gold ringed in black, lifted to hers. "I came to tell you I will not force your hand. The choice is yours, little moon. But know this. I feel every beat of his heart, the way I felt yours that night. Distance means nothing. Denial means nothing. He is of my blood, and I will burn the world before I let harm come to either of you." The possessiveness in his voice wasn't cruel, it was ancient, inevitable, the way gravity owns the fall. Elara wrapped her arms around herself, around the fragile life that tethered her to two impossible futures. "Thorn thinks the pup is his," she whispered. "He's happy. For the first time in years, he's happy." Pain flashed across Lucian's face, raw and startling. "And you?" he asked, voice rough. "Are you happy, Elara, living half a truth?" The question sank into her like a blade. She couldn't answer. Tears blurred the moon into fractured light. Lucian closed the distance then, slowly, giving her every chance to flee. When she stayed rooted, trembling, he lifted one hand, not touching, only hovering near her cheek as if her skin might scorch him. "I won't ask you to leave him tonight," he said so quietly she felt it more than heard it. "But the moon is rising full in 3 days. When it crests, the bond will sing too loudly to ignore, for you, for me, for the child. Be ready." His knuckles brushed the air beside her jaw, a caress that never quite landed, yet her whole body leaned toward it helplessly. Then he was gone, melting back into the trees as silently as he'd come. Elara sank to the moss, pressing both hands to her mouth to muffle the sob that tore free. The feather lay crushed in her fist, silver thread glinting like a chain. Far away on the northern border, Thorn froze mid-sentence as an unfamiliar scent ghosted across his senses, wild, regal, and laced with the unmistakable trace of his mate's skin. His eyes bled to alpha gold. And deep in the forest, something ancient stirred, watching, waiting for the night the moon would demand its due. Chapter 4. The Goddess's Whisper. The moon had not yet reached its full, but it already pulled at Elara like a tide inside her blood. She walked home through the pre-dawn dark, barefoot, Thorn's shirt hanging to her thighs, the crushed raven feather hidden in her clenched fist. Every step felt borrowed. Every breath tasted like the moment before a scream. She expected the cabin to be empty. It was not. Thorn stood at the hearth, back to her, shoulders rigid beneath the leather coat he hadn't worn since the night he left for the border. The fire was dead. Only embers glowed, painting his silhouette in blood and shadow. He didn't turn when the door creaked. He didn't need to. His voice came low, almost conversational, and therefore 1,000 times more terrifying. "Whose scent is on you, Elara?" The world narrowed to that single question. She had imagined this moment 100 times since the cave, had rehearsed denials, tears, begging, rage, but none of the scripts survived the quiet fury rolling off him now. It filled the room like smoke, thick enough to choke on. "I asked you a question, mate." The last word cracked like a whip. Elara's knees buckled. She caught the table's edge to stay upright. The feathers slipped from her fingers and fluttered to the floorboards between them, white against dark wood, damning and delicate. Thorn's gaze dropped to it. Something lethal flickered across his face. "I can explain," she started, voice barely a thread. "Can you?" He faced her at last. His eyes were no longer green. They were pure, molten gold. Wolf eyes in a human face, ancient and heartbroken. Because I have been tracking that scent for hours, Northridge, sacred pole. My mate carrying my child bathed in the smell of another alpha. His voice never rose, and that was worse. Tell me I'm wrong, Alara. Tell me my nose has failed me for the first time in my life. She couldn't. Silence stretched, cruel and absolute. Thorn's chest rose and fell once, hard, as though he'd taken a physical blow. When he spoke again, the anger had drained away, leaving only raw devastation. I thought the goddess had finally answered us, he said almost to himself. I thought the pup was our miracle. I held you last night believing I was holding my future. A muscle jumped in his jaw. Instead, I was holding a lie. Alara shattered. She fell to her knees right there on the cabin floor, the impact jarring through bone. Sobs tore out of her, ugly, ragged things she couldn't cage. I didn't mean for it to happen, she choked. I was broken, Thorn. You were pulling away. The pack was turning, and I was drowning. One night, one moment of weakness. One moment? His laugh was hollow. You carry his child, Alara. That is not a moment. That is forever. She pressed both hands to her belly as if she could shield the pup from the truth. I didn't know who he was. I swear on the moon I didn't know. Thorn stared at her for a long, endless heartbeat. Then he crossed the room in 2 strides, dropped to one knee in front of her, and cupped her wet cheeks with hands that trembled. I love you, he said, voice ragged. I have loved you through every barren moon, every disappointed elder, every night I failed to give you what you needed. I will love you through this too if you let me, but I deserve the truth, all of it. His name, what he wants, what you want. Alara searched his face, stunned by the love still burning there beneath the pain. She had expected rage, banishment, claws, not this terrifying, selfless devotion. I don't know what I want, she whispered. I only know I'm terrified of losing you. Thorn closed his eyes. When he opened them again, the gold had receded, leaving only aching green. Then we face it together, he said. But no more secrets. Swear it. I swear, she breathed. He pulled her into his arms, crushing her against his chest as though he could fuse them back together through sheer will. She clung to him, sobbing into his coat, the scent of pine and steel and home drowning out, for one merciful moment, the memory of storm and cave. Neither of them saw the faint shimmer in the air above the cold hearth. A woman made of moonlight and star smoke took shape, tall, silver-eyed, crowned with a crescent that bled soft light across the walls. The moon goddess herself, unseen by mortal eyes, yet close enough to touch. She looked upon the broken pair kneeling in each other's arms, and sorrow softened her luminous face. My brave children, she murmured, voice like wind through ancient trees. You think this is punishment. You think this is betrayal. But I do not break what I do not intend to remake stronger. Her gaze lowered to Alara's belly, where the pup turned restlessly, sensing its grandmother's presence. The threads were knotted long before you drew breath, the goddess whispered. One night of storm was never accident, it was ignition. She reached out, trailing fingers of light across the air above them. Where her touch passed, the crushed raven feather on the floor unfurled, restored and glowing faintly. 3 nights remain until the full moon crown, she said. On that night, every hidden thing will be revealed, every wounded heart tested. Endure, my daughter. Endure, my son. The child you both protect, by blood or by choice, will need the strength only forged in fire. The vision faded as softly as it had come, leaving only the faint scent of night-blooming jasmine and the sudden, impossible warmth in the room. Alara lifted her head, unaware of what they had been granted, only feeling the shift like a storm pausing to draw breath. Thorn pressed his forehead to hers. Whatever comes, he said, voice steady again. We meet it side by side. Outside, the sky paled toward morning. Somewhere beyond the tree line, golden eyes watched the cabin, patient as winter, waiting for the moon to swell and secrets to spill like blood. And deep in Alara's womb, the pup kicked hard, once, twice, as though answering a call it already knew by heart. Chapter 5, Shadows in the Pack. The next 3 days passed like the slow tightening of a noose. The pack felt it first. Wolves are creatures of instinct. They taste change on the wind the way humans taste rain. Conversations hushed when Alara walked through the village square. Mothers pulled pups closer. The elders watched her with eyes too knowing, lips pressed thin. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. She carried herself with deliberate calm, spine straight, chin lifted, one hand resting lightly on the faint curve of her belly that only she and Thorn could yet see. But inside she was splintering. Every heartbeat felt borrowed. Every smile felt like treason. Thorn never left her side for long. He rose before dawn to run the borders, returned with frost on his lashes and tension carved into the set of his shoulders, then stayed close enough that their scents braided together again, his pine and steel overlaying the wilder, darker note that clung to her skin like sin. He was trying to reclaim her with presence alone, and the effort broke her heart anew. On the second night, the elders summoned them to the circle of stones. The ancient ring stood on a hill beneath open sky, 13 monoliths older than any living memory, veined with silver that caught moonlight like frozen lightning. Torches guttered in the wind. Every adult member of Silverfang waited in silence, fur cloaks drawn tight against the cold. Elder Mira stepped forward, her face lined as old bark, eyes sharp as winter stars. "The Luna carries new life," she began, voice carrying without effort. "A miracle after barren years. The pack rejoices." A murmur rippled through the crowd, polite, uncertain. But miracles cast long shadows," Mira continued, "and shadows have begun to move." She lifted a gnarled hand. 2 warriors dragged forward a bound rogue wolf, half-starved, trembling, reeking of foreign earth. His eyes were wide and white with terror. "He was caught 3 miles inside our border," Myra said, "carrying this." She held up a strip of black silk, embroidered with a crimson crown encircled by thorns, the royal crest of the High King. Gas hissed through the pack like wind through dry grass. The rogue dropped to his knees, voice cracking. "The king searches for a woman, dark-haired, storm-eyed, marked by his scent. He will burn every pack between here and the sea until she is found." Alara felt the world tilt. Thorn's hand clamped around hers so tightly her bones creaked, grounding her, claiming her, warning the entire pack in one gesture. "Touch her and die." Mira's gaze settled on Alara, gentle, ancient, merciless. "Child," the elder said softly, "the moon waxes full tomorrow night. Secrets kept past that crest become wounds that never close. Speak now, or let the goddess speak for you." Silence fell so complete that Alara heard her own pulse thundering in her ears. She stepped forward, pulling free of Thorn's grip, not in rejection, but because this truth was hers to carry. The torches painted her shadow huge against the nearest monolith. "I am the woman he seeks," she said. Her voice did not shake. "One night, in storm and grief, I lay with a stranger. I did not know he was your king until after the deed was done. The child I carry is his by blood." A collective inhale sharp enough to cut flesh. Then chaos tried to erupt. Shouts, snarls, wolves shifting halfway in fury, but Thorn roared, one wordless command laced with full alpha power, and every wolf in the circle dropped to their knees, throats bared, unable to resist. He moved to stand in front of her, shielding her with his body, hackles raised though he remained in human form. "Listen well," he snarled, voice rolling like avalanche. "Alara is my mate, my Luna. The child she carries will be raised as Silverfang, under my protection, under my name if she wishes it. Any wolf who disputes this disputes me, and I will end them." The threat hung in the frigid air, absolute. Elder Mira watched him with unreadable eyes, then turned to Alara. "And you, little moon. Do you accept this protection, knowing what it may cost your mate when the king comes?" Alara stepped out from behind Thorn. The wind caught her hair, whipping it like a battle standard. "I accept it," she said clearly. "But I will not hide behind it. If the Alpha King wants this child, he will have to walk through me first." A ripple of shock and something perilously close to awe passed through the pack. Mira inclined her head, the faintest smile touching her lips. "Then the circle bears witness. Blood of the king or blood of Silverfang, this pup is pack. Let any who challenge that answer to tooth and claw." The rogue was dragged away, still babbling about fire and crowns. The meeting dissolved into uneasy murmurs. Thorn pulled Alara close the moment they were alone on the path home, burying his face in her hair. "You should have let me shield you completely," he whispered, voice raw. "I won't make you smaller to save myself," she answered against his throat. "Not ever again." He shuddered, arms tightening until she could feel his heart trying to hammer its way out of his chest and into hers. That night, neither slept. They lay tangled in furs, fully clothed, her back to his front, his hands splayed over the place their child grew. The silence between them was no longer brittle, it was tempered steel. Outside, clouds swallowed the stars. The moon swelled, fat and hungry, one night away from full, and on the ridge above the village, a lone figure stood silhouetted against the racing sky. Tall, regal, cloak snapping like black wings. Golden eyes fixed on the faint glow of the Alpha's cabin. Lucian lifted his face to the wind and inhaled the mingled scents of his mate and the man who stood between them. Tomorrow the moon would rise crimson with promise and threat. Tomorrow everything would burn or be reborn. He smiled, slow and feral, and the night itself seemed to bow. Inside the cabin, the pup kicked hard against Thorn's palm, as if already choosing sides, or refusing to choose at all. Chapter 6. The King's Claim. The full moon rose like a blade drawn from fire. It crested the ridge at twilight, swollen and blood gold, so bright it bleached the forest silver. Every wolf in Silver Fang felt the pull in their marrow. Some dropped to all fours and howled without meaning to. Ilara felt it as a fist around her heart, squeezing until she could barely breathe. She stood on the porch, one hand braced against the rail, the other cradling the small hard curve that had appeared almost overnight. The pup was restless tonight, rolling and kicking as though trying to claw its way out to meet the moon. Thorn came up behind her, silent. He had not spoken since dawn. There was nothing left to say that the night would not force from them. "They're here," he said at last, voice low. She followed his gaze. Across the clearing, where the tree line met the village, shadows peeled away from shadows. 20 wolves, no, 30 stepped into the moonlight in perfect unison. Black banners edged in crimson snapped in the wind. At their center walked one man. Lucian? He wore no crown tonight, only a sleeveless tunic of midnight leather that left his arms bare to the cold, every line of him carved and lethal. His hair was unbound, whipping like a war banner. The torchlight caught the gold in his eyes and turned them molten. The pack formed a living wall between the intruders and their Luna. Thorn stood at its head, claws half extended, lips peeled back from lengthening fangs. A growl rolled out of him that rattled windows. Lucian stopped 10 paces away, his gaze never left Ilara. "Little moon," he said, and the words carried over the snarls and the wind as though the night itself bent to let them through. "Come to me." Every wolf bristled. Thorn took one menacing step forward. "She is Silver Fang," he snarled. "You have no claim here, king or not." Lucian's eyes flicked to Thorn, measuring, almost pitying. "I have every claim." His voice dropped to something intimate, meant for Ilara alone yet loud enough for the entire pack to hear. "Tell them, mate. Tell them whose blood sings in your veins tonight. Tell them whose child turns toward me even now." Ilara felt it. A sudden, fierce tug deep inside, as if an invisible cord stretched from her womb straight to the man standing in the moonlight. The pup kicked so hard she staggered. Thorn caught her elbow, steadying her, but his grip trembled with barely leashed violence. "Ilara," Thorn warned through clenched teeth. "Do not move." But she was already walking. And 1 step. 2. The pack parted for her like water around a stone, fear and awe warring on every face. She felt the weight of every stare, the weight of centuries of law and loyalty and blood debt. None of it mattered. The moon was a drum in her blood, and it beat only one name. She stopped an arm's length from Lucian. Up close, he was even more devastating. Taller than memory, the scent of storm and cedar and wild, dark places rolling off him until her knees threatened to fold. "You came for war," she said, voice steady only because the moon held her upright. "I came for you," he answered. "War is what they choose if they keep you from me." Behind her, Thorn growled again, low and broken. Lucian's gaze softened just a fraction. "I will not take what is not freely given," he told her quietly. "But I will not leave without what is mine. The child is mine, Ilara, and so, if you will have me, are you?" He extended one hand, palm up. No command, only invitation. The clearing held its breath. Ilara looked back once. Thorn stood like a statue carved from rage and grief, golden eyes bleeding to wolf, fists clenched so hard blood dripped between his fingers where claws had pierced his own palms. The pack arrayed behind him looked ready to die for her. She turned again to Lucian and placed her hand in his. A visible shudder ran through him, as though the moon itself had just settled into his bones. He closed his fingers around hers gently, reverently, then pulled her forward until she stood at his side. Thorn made a sound like a dying animal. Lucian lifted his other hand. Instantly, his warriors dropped to one knee, heads bowed. The message was unmistakable. He could end Silver Fang tonight if he chose. Instead, he looked straight at Thorn. "I offer alliance," he called, voice ringing clear. "Not conquest. Your pack keeps its lands, its name, its alpha. I ask only what the goddess has already bound, my mate and my heir under my protection. Refuse, and we spill blood beneath her moon. Accept, and Silver Fang rises as the cradle of the next royal line. Choose." The silence was suffocating. Ilara felt the moment stretch until something inside her threatened to snap. She stepped half a pace forward, still holding Lucien's hand, and faced her pack, her family. I love you, she said, voice cracking on every word. All of you, Thorn most of all. I never wanted to break what we had, but this child. She pressed her free hand to her belly. The pup kicked again, hard, toward its father. This child was never mine alone to keep. The goddess spoke plainer than any of us wished. I will not let you die for my mistake. Thorn's face crumpled. He took one involuntary step toward her, then stopped, pride and anguish warring. Elder Mira moved through the ranks until she stood before Lucien. She studied him for a long moment, then turned to the pack. The old prophecies, she said simply, speak of a pup born beneath a storm moon, conceived in sorrow, claimed by two crowns. The one who unites the broken lines will end the long schism or begin the final war. The choice was always coming. It stands before us now. She looked at Ilara, eyes shining with unshed tears. Will you be the bridge child or the blade? Ilara felt the weight of centuries settle on her shoulders. She looked from Thorn's devastated face to Lucien's fiercely hopeful one, and something inside her steadied. I will be the bridge, she said. Then, before anyone could stop her, she pulled free of Lucien's grasp, walked back across the no-man's land of moonlight, and took Thorn's blood-slick hand. He stared at her as though she were a ghost. I choose both, she told him, loud enough for every wolf to hear. I choose you as my mate, my heart, my home, and I choose him as the father of this child, and whatever future the goddess demands. If that future is peace, then let it begin here, with all of us, or none. She turned to Lucien. Do you accept? A slow, wondering smile curved his mouth, the first true softness she had ever seen on him. I accept, he said. He crossed the space in 3 strides, dropped to one knee before Thorn, not in submission but in respect, and offered his forearm in the ancient gesture of alliance. For a heartbeat, Thorn did nothing. Then slowly, he clasped it. The howl that went up from Silverfang shook the stars. Lucien rose, eyes never leaving Ilara's. The moon is high, he said softly. Walk with me. Thorn's grip on her other hand tightened, pain and permission braided together.
Go, he whispered, but come back.
She nodded, tears blinding her, and let Lucien lead her into the forest. Behind them, 2 packs began, warily, to breathe the same air. Ahead, beneath the blazing moon, waited the first night of a future no prophecy had fully warned them about. And inside Ilara, the pup finally settled, quiet for the first time in days, as though it had finally heard both its father's heartbeats and judged them enough. Chapter 7, Fractured Bonds. The forest swallowed them whole. Moonlight filtered through the canopy in thin silver blades, slicing across the path just enough to see. Ilara walked between the 2 men who now held pieces of her soul in their bare hands, and the silence was so loud it rang. Lucien led. Thorn followed 3 paces behind, close enough to protect, far enough to give the illusion of distance. None of them spoke. Words felt too small for what had just happened in the clearing. The sacred moon pool lay ahead, black glass under the swollen moon. Ilara's breath clouded in the cold. When they reached the water's edge, Lucien stopped. Thorn stopped. She stood between them, feeling the heat of 2 alpha bodies like opposing fires. Lucien was the first to break. He turned to her, eyes glowing soft gold in the dark. Ask me anything, little moon. I will answer true. Ilara's throat ached. Why me? The question cracked open years of grief. Of all the wombs in all the packs, why did the goddess choose the one that had already failed? Lucien's face twisted, something ancient and wounded. Because you never failed, he said, voice rough. You endured. You carried the weight of an entire pack's disappointment, and still rose every morning with kindness in your eyes. The goddess does not choose the strongest body. She chooses the heart that refuses to harden. He took one careful step closer. I felt you across kingdoms the night you broke. Your sorrow called to me like a war horn. I came as fast as I could. The storm only gave me the cover I needed. Thorn made a low sound, half pain, half protest. Lucien turned to him, unflinching. I know what I took from you, Thorn of Silverfang. I know the nights you held her while she cried herself empty. I know the blame you carried when the healers said Barren. I am not here to steal what is yours. I am here because fate is cruel and beautiful and will not let any of us walk away clean. Thorn's voice came out, scraped raw. You speak of fate like it's mercy. She was mine first. And she is yours still, Lucien answered. I do not ask her to stop loving you. I ask only for the space my son will need. Your son, Thorn repeated, the words tasting like poison. Our son, Ilara cut in, fierce and sudden. Both men looked at her. He will have 2 fathers, 2 names, 2 packs. Or he will have none. I will not raise him in the ashes of the war you 2 could start tonight. She stepped forward until she stood in the small charged triangle where their shadows overlapped. I am tired of being the wound between you, she said, voice shaking with fury and exhaustion. I am tired of guilt and shame and impossible choices. Look at me, both of you. Look. They did. Moonlight painted her pale and fierce, belly rounded with promise, eyes blazing like winter stars. I love you, she told Thorn, and the words broke him open all over again. I never stopped, not for one heartbeat. And she turned to Lucian, tears sliding free. I don't know what this is yet, but it is real, and it terrifies me, and I will not deny it to spare anyone's pride. She reached out, took Thorn's bleeding hand, then Lucian's, and pressed their palms together over her belly. The pup kicked, hard, deliberate, right against the place where 2 alpha hearts now touched through her skin. Silence. Then Thorn exhaled, a sound like surrender and salvation braided together. Lucian's eyes closed. When they opened again, the king was gone. Only a man remained, stunned and humbled. He knows us both, Lucian whispered, wonder cracking his voice. Thorn stared at their joined hands as though seeing a miracle he hadn't dared believe in. Slowly, carefully, his fingers curled, not to crush, but to hold. I will not lose her, he said to Lucian, quiet, deadly, and achingly honest. But I will not lose him either, if this is what the goddess demands. His throat worked. Then we learn to share the sky. Lucian's grip tightened, not in challenge, but in vow. We learn, he echoed. Ilara felt the moment the fracture began to knit. Not healed, never that quickly, but no longer fatal. She sagged, suddenly boneless. Both men moved at once, catching her before her knees hit the moss. Thorn's arms came first. Familiar. Home. Lucian's followed, steadying her from behind, foreign yet already protective. They lowered her gently to the soft earth beside the pool. For a long time no one moved. 3 bodies, 2 heartbeats outside, 1 inside, breathing the same cold air beneath the same merciless moon. Eventually Thorn spoke, voice rough with everything he could not yet say. When he is born, I want to be the first to hold him after you. Lucian's answer came against her hair, barely audible. And I want you there when I do. Ilara closed her eyes and let the tears fall unchecked. They were not tears of grief tonight. They were the first tears of something too large for any one heart to carry alone. Above them, the moon reached its zenith, perfect and pitiless, and for one trembling instant the goddess's light seemed to pour straight through the 3 of them, binding, branding, blessing. Far away in the village, the pack howled, not in mourning, not in triumph, but in stunned fragile hope. And around the moon pool, 3 shadows slowly merged into one. The long schism had waited centuries for this night. It would have to wait a little longer. Chapter 8. Trials of the Moon. The moon began its descent, bleeding silver across the water, but none of them moved to leave the mossy bank. Time felt thin here, like frost that would shatter at the first wrong breath. Ilara sat cradled between them, Thorn at her back, his legs stretched along hers, arms locked loosely around her ribs just beneath her breasts. Lucian in front, knees bent, one hand resting over the place where their child thrummed like a second heart. Their warmth bled into her from both sides until the night no longer felt cold. No one spoke of going home. Home was no longer a single cabin or a single crown. The hush lasted until the first scream split the valley. A howl followed, raw, panicked silver fang. Then another and another, rising into a chorus of terror that scraped every nerve raw. Thorn was on his feet in an instant, shifting mid-rise. Clothes shredding as midnight fur exploded across his frame. Lucian followed a heartbeat later, larger, black as the void between stars. Ilara scrambled up, heart slamming against her ribs. Smoke. She smelled it now, acrid wrong, laced with something chemical that stung the throat. Fire. Thorn's massive head swung toward her, golden eyes blazing. Stay. Lucian's deeper rumble vibrated through the earth. With me. She bared her teeth at both of them. I am Luna, and I am carrying the future of every pack here. Try to leave me behind and see how far you get. Thorn snarled but didn't argue. Lucian dipped his great head in something perilously close to pride. They ran. The village was burning, not the careless blaze of a hearth left unattended. This was deliberate. Cabins licked with blue, white flame that ate wood like acid. Wolves staggered in the square, coughing, eyes streaming. Children wailed. The air reeked of silver nitrate and wolfsbane, poisons meant to blind and cripple. At the center stood a ring of strangers in matte black armor none of the packs recognized. Faces hidden behind visors that reflected the inferno. Their banner was a broken moon dripping red. The Schism's fanatics had come out of hiding. Thorn roared, a sound that cracked the night open and tore into the nearest line. Lucian followed like black lightning, jaws closing around a throat with surgical precision. Blood painted the snow. Elara's wolf surged, desperate to shift, to fight, to protect, but the pup twisted hard in warning. She could not risk the change. Instead, she ran toward the pup's longhouse where the youngest were trapped by a wall of unnatural flame. Elder Mir met her halfway, face streaked with soot, dragging two crying toddlers by the hand. "They're trying to take the children," she rasped. "They want leverage against the prophecy." Elara's blood turned to ice and fire at once. She spun, searching the chaos, and saw it. 3 armored figures forcing a group of pups toward the tree line, silver chains glinting. A snarl ripped out of her that had nothing to do with size and everything to do with motherhood. She sprinted, faster than she'd ever moved while human, vaulting fallen beams, ignoring the burn in her lungs. She hit the first attacker like a storm made flesh, fingers hooked into claws, driving him to the ground. He swung a poison blade. She twisted, felt the kiss of metal along her ribs, and slammed her elbow into his visor until it cracked. The second lunged. She ducked, scooped a burning branch from the ground, and drove the flaming end into the gap at his neck. He dropped, screaming. The third had almost reached the trees with a small girl clutched against his chest. Anya, 6 years old, Thorn's favorite shadow. Elara did the only thing left. She screamed the Luna's call. It was an ancient thing. Older than Pax, older than language, a note of pure command that only a true Luna could release when her young were threatened. It tore through the valley like a shockwave. Every wolf, Silverfang, Royal Guard, even the attackers staggered and dropped to their knees, skulls ringing. The armored man holding Anya froze, arms going slack. The little girl wriggled free and bolted toward Elara. In that single heartbeat of stunned silence, Thorn and Lucian hit the remaining enemies from opposite sides, a perfectly synchronized avalanche of rage and fang. When the last attacker fell, the fire still burned, but the night belonged to them again. Elara stood in the center of the square, soot-streaked, blood running warm down her side, surrounded by trembling pups who pressed against her legs like she was the only solid thing left in the world. Her chest heaved. The cut along her ribs stung, but the pain felt distant, unimportant. Thorn shifted back first, naked, streaked with blood and ash, and dropped to his knees in front of her. He didn't speak, just pressed his forehead to her belly, arms wrapping around her hips, shaking with the aftermath of terror. Lucian followed a moment later, equally blood-drenched, and knelt on her other side. His hand found Thorn's on her back without hesitation. 2 alphas bowed to the same small, fierce woman who had just drawn a line in burning earth. "Touch these children, and you answer to me." The pack watched in stunned silence as their leaders, rival and mate, knelt together, shielding their Luna and the future she carried. Above them, the moon slipped behind a cloud as if even the goddess needed a moment to recover from what she had just witnessed. Elara looked down at the 2 men holding her, at the pups clinging to her legs, at the village smoldering but unbroken, and felt something vast settle into place inside her chest. The war had come early. They had answered it as one. And somewhere in the dark beyond the firelight, the real enemy took note and began to fear. Chapter 9. United Under Stars. The village did not sleep again that night. Flames were smothered with earth and snow, the wounded carried to the healer's hall. The dead, 4 of Silverfang, 7 of Lucian's guard, and 12 of the enemy, laid in a silent row beneath the watch of the sinking moon. Children clung to whoever would hold them. No one asked anymore whose pack they belonged to. Elara moved through the smoke and grief like a woman made of iron and starlight. She knelt beside every injured wolf, pressed her palm to fevered brows, whispered names until eyes focused on her, and remembered they were still alive. Blood crusted the tear in her side, but she refused Mir's herbs until the last pup was safe. Only when dawn bled pale across the ruined roofs did she let her legs give out. Thorn caught her before she hit the ground. Lucian was half a breath behind, steadying her other side. Neither asked permission. They simply lifted her together and carried her to the Alpha's cabin, the only building still mostly whole. Inside, the hearth had gone cold hours ago. They laid her on the white bed that still smelled of Thorn's pine and her own wildflowers. The room felt too small for the 3 of them now, too full of everything unsaid and newly forged. Mira followed, silent, and cleaned the gash along Elara's ribs. The blade had carried wolfsbane. The edges were black and angry. Poison, the elder muttered. Slow acting. She needs rest and the antidote draft. Elara tried to sit up. There are others. Others have been seen too. Mira cut in. Voice soft but iron. You will lie still, Luna, or I will have both these alphas pin you down. Thorn's low growl said he would do it. Lucian's silence said the same. Elara subsided, exhaustion crashing over her like a wave. Mira forced bitter liquid between her lips, then pulled the furs up to her chin. Sleep, she ordered, and left the three of them alone. The door shut with a quiet click that sounded final. For a long moment no one moved. Then Thorn spoke, voice hoarse from smoke and screaming. We need a plan. They know where we are now. They know what she carries. Lucian stood at the window, staring out at the smoldering village. Dawn light carved harsh lines across his face. They know because someone told them, he said flatly. Someone inside one of our circles. Thorn's head snapped around. You accusing my pack? I'm accusing treachery, Lucian answered without turning. And it wears a familiar face. Ilara's heart stuttered. No, she whispered. Not after tonight. Not after we... Tonight proved we can fight as one, Lucian cut in, finally facing them. It did not prove we are safe. He crossed the room in 3 strides and dropped to his knees beside the bed, taking her hand with a gentleness that looked foreign on him. They will come again, harder, with more poison, more fire, more silver, and next time they will not stop at the village. They will come for you and the child directly. Thorn's jaw worked. Then we don't give them a single target. He sat on her other side, threading his fingers through hers so that both alphas held her between them again. Mirror images of the night at the moon pool, but harder now, tempered in blood. We move the pack, Thorn continued, deep into the royal stronghold. Your walls, your numbers, your wards. Lucian's eyes narrowed. You would abandon Silverfang land? I would keep my family breathing. Thorn shot back. Land can be reclaimed. Lives cannot. Silence stretched, taut as a bowstring. Lucian looked down at their joined hands, Thorn's calloused and scarred, his own marked with the royal crest tattooed across the knuckles. Then he nodded once, sharp. Done. My stronghold becomes ours. But on one condition. Thorn's grip on Elara tightened. Name it. Lucian met Elara's eyes. When the pup is born, he carries both names. Silver, Fang, and Crown. No hiding whose blood runs in him. The world will know he is the bridge. Elara felt the weight of that promise settle into her bones like destiny. Thorn exhaled slowly. He will have 2 fathers in every way that matters, he said. I swear it on my life. Lucian's throat worked. He bowed his head, king to Alpha, in a gesture older than any throne. Then we ride at dusk, he said. Every wolf, every pup, every elder. We leave nothing here for them to burn again. Elara turned her face into Thorn's shoulder, then reached blindly for Lucian. He leaned in until her forehead rested against his. 3 heartbeats, 1 rhythm. Outside, the pack began to move with quiet purpose, packing what could be carried, burning what could not. No one wept any more. They had seen their Luna stand bleeding in the fire and refuse to fall. They had seen 2 alphas kneel to her together. Grief had been cauterized into resolve. By nightfall, the village stood empty, roofs still smoldering, a skull on the earth. The long column of wolves, Silver Fang and Royal Guard, marching side by side, wound north under a sky wiped clean of clouds. Torches flickered like a river of stars carried on paws and shoulders. Elara rode in the center, cradled between Thorn and Lucian on a single massive warhorse bred to carry royalty. She was half asleep from exhaustion and antidote, but every time she stirred, one or both of them tightened their hold. Behind them, the wind scattered ashes across abandoned ground. Ahead, the royal stronghold waited, ancient stone crowned with silver, built to withstand siege for 1,000 years. And high above the moon, no longer full, but still bright enough to see by, sailed ahead of them like a promise kept. For the first time since the storm in the cave, Elara felt the pup settle into perfect stillness. Safe, loved, home, wherever they were going was no longer a place. It was the space between 2 heartbeats that had finally learned to beat as one. Chapter 10, Goddess's Revelation. They reached the stronghold as the moon slipped into its dark phase, a thin silver scar against a sky thick with winter stars. The fortress rose from the cliff like something the mountain itself had birthed. Black stone veined with silver, towers crowned by crescent banners that snapped in the wind. Gates tall enough for giants opened without sound. Inside, torches burned blue-white, and every guard who lined the walls dropped to one knee as the weary column passed, not for the king alone, but for the small, fierce woman cradled between 2 alphas. Elara barely saw any of it. The poison and the ride had drained her to the dregs. She remembered only fragments, Thorn's arms tightening whenever the horse stumbled, Lucian's low voice murmuring ancient words of binding and protection against her ear. The way both of them breathed relief when the gates finally closed behind the last Silverfang pup. Then strong arms carried her through corridors lit by starlight and moonglow, up winding stairs, until she was laid on a bed wide enough for three. Furs, silk, the scent of cedar and high-altitude air. Hands stripped away soot-crusted clothes washed the blood from her skin, bound fresh linen over her wound. She floated in and out of fever dreams where fire and moonlight traded places. When she woke fully, it was deep night. The room was vast and quiet, open to a balcony that looked over the endless spine of the world. A single brazier burned low. Thorn sat on the bed's edge, elbows on knees, head bowed as though carrying the weight of every life they had brought inside these walls. Lucian stood at the balcony doors, silhouetted against starlight, arms folded, motionless. Neither had slept. Elara's voice came out, a cracked whisper. "Come here. Both of you." They moved at once. Thorn crawled onto the bed and gathered her against his chest the way he had the first night he ever held her, like she was the only warmth in winter. Lucian hesitated only a heartbeat before sliding in on her other side, careful, reverent, until she lay cradled between them exactly as she had on the horse. Their heat chased the last of the fever from her bones. For a long time no one spoke. There was only breath and heartbeat and the slow, steady kick of the pup reminding them why they had burned a village to keep moving forward. Then the air shimmered. Moonlight poured through the open balcony thick as cream, pooling on the floor until it rose into the shape of a woman taller than any mortal. Skin like starlit snow, hair a river of night, eyes twin full moons. She wore armor of silver leaves and carried no weapon. She needed none. Thorn stiffened. Lucian went to his knees on the furs without thinking. Elara tried to rise, but the goddess lifted one luminous hand. "A peace, my brave ones. Tonight I come not to command, but to reveal." Her voice was every lullaby and every war cry braided together. She stepped forward until moonlight touched each of them in turn. "Long ago," she began, "I shattered the great pack into many, because pride had grown poisonous. I vowed the fracture would heal only when three impossible things occurred under the same moon. A barren Luna would conceive a king's heir, two rival alphas would kneel to the same heart, and fire would fail to consume the bridge between them." She looked at Elara, and tears of liquid starlight slid down divine cheeks. "You, my daughter, have carried every sorrow I asked, and never once let it harden you. You, Thorn of Silverfang, laid down centuries of blood right for love. You, Lucian of the Crown, set aside conquest for covenant. The long schism ends not with war, but with this night." The goddess extended both hands. Light poured from her palms, wrapping around their joined bodies like living silver thread. "I name this child the Dawnbearer," she said. "His birth will seal the rift. No pack will ever again stand apart. But first, the final trial." Her glow dimmed, sorrow deepening. "The poison in your wound, Elara, was forged from my own dark phase, moonless silver, the only metal that can unmake what I have made. It will try to claim you and the child before the new moon rises. You must choose. Cling to life and risk losing him, or surrender your strength so he may live." Elara's heart stopped. Thorn's arms locked around her so hard she felt his ribs shudder. "No," he snarled at the goddess herself. "There has to be another way." Lucian's voice was deathly quiet. "Take me instead. My blood is royal. It will satisfy any curse." The goddess smiled, ancient and heartbroken. "Love freely offered is the only antidote older than my darkness. You have already begun to brew it. But it must be complete. Every wall fallen, every jealousy burned away, every drop of pride surrendered, before the moon dies entirely. 3 nights remain." She reached out, brushing ghostly fingers across Elara's cheek, then Thorn's, then Lucian's. "I do not ask you to be perfect," she whispered. "I ask you to be whole." Then she was gone. Moonlight collapsed back into ordinary silver, spilling across the bed like spilled milk. Elara turned her face into Thorn's neck and sobbed, raw, ugly sounds that tore out of her like birth itself. Thorn held her as though he could absorb the poison through his own skin. Lucian pressed his forehead to her belly and stayed there, silent, shoulders shaking with the force of feelings too large for any king to contain. Outside, the sky began to pale toward a dawn none of them had expected to greet. 3 nights. 3 hearts learning how to beat as one, or everything ended. Elara lifted her head, tears still falling, and looked from one devastated face to the other. Then we don't waste a single hour, she said, voice fierce through the grief. Whatever walls are left, we tear them down tonight. She reached for both their hands and pulled them closer until there was no space left for old wounds or older titles. And in the hush before sunrise, the three of them began the hardest, holiest work of all, choosing minute by minute, breath by breath, to love without condition, without possession, without fear. Because the moon was dying, and their child, the dawn-bearer, was the only light left to replace it. Chapter 11, Dawn of Destiny. 3 nights without a moon. The stronghold held its breath. Torches burned low. Wolves moved on silent pause. No one sang, no one laughed, no one dared speak above a whisper as though sound itself might tip the balance. Inside the royal chamber, time fractured into heartbeats. Elar lay propped against a mountain of furs, skin wax pale, lips bloodless. The moonless poison crawled through her veins like black frost. Every hour stole a little more color, a little more strength, yet her eyes, storm grey and fierce, never dimmed. Thorn and Lucian had not left her side once. They took turns holding her when the pain peaked, pressing cool cloths to her brow, whispering stories of the world they would build for their son. When the fever made her shiver, they wrapped her between them, 2 furnace bodies pouring life back into hers. When she slept, fitful, gasping, they kept vigil, hands linked across her belly so the pup would never feel alone. On the second night, the poison reached her heart. Her pulse stuttered. Monitors of bone and silver, ancient royal relics, screamed. Healers flooded the room, but Mira pushed them all back with the snarl no elder should possess. Out. This is not work for herbs anymore. The door slammed. Silence fell like an axe. Ilara's eyes fluttered open. She looked at Thorn first, then Lucian, and managed the ghost of her old smile. I'm not afraid, she lied. Voice barely a thread. Youth Thorn made a broken sound and pressed his forehead to hers. Don't you dare leave us. Lucian took her hand, brought it to his lips, kissed every knuckle like a vow. We are the antidote, little moon. You taught us how to love without breaking. Now let us give it back. She closed her eyes, tears slipped free and froze on her temples. Then don't hold anything back, she whispered. No titles, no pride, no yesterday. Just us. So they laid every last piece bare. Thorn told Lucian about the first time Ilara laughed after a year of silence, how it had felt like spring breaking through ice. Lucian told Thorn about the centuries he had ruled alone, how one night of storm had ruined him for solitude forever. They spoke of fears they had never voiced, Thorn's terror that he would only ever be the spare father, Lucian's dread that his crown would always stand between them. They wept without shame, they forgave without being asked. And with every truth the poison recoiled. On the third night, the sky was absolute black. No stars dared shine. Ilara's breathing turned shallow. The pup had gone eerily still, as though gathering strength for what came next. Thorn and Lucian knelt on either side of the bed, foreheads touching hers, hands linked over the hard swell of her belly. Their voices, rough, harmonious, unbreakable, filled the room with the oldest binding chant 2 alphas can offer. Not conquest, not dominance, but surrender to the same heart. By blood and breath and bone, they swore together. We claim this life as ours to guard, to love, to raise as one. No line divides us. No crown outranks love. Let the goddess bear witness. The poison surged one final time. Black veins racing beneath Ilara's skin like cracks in marble. She arched off the bed with a cry that contained every sorrow she had ever carried. Light answered. Not moonlight. There was none left. But something warmer. Gold as sunrise pouring from the place where their 3 hands joined. It flooded her veins. Burned the darkness out root by root. The healers outside the door fell to their knees, blinded by the glow that leaked beneath the wood. Ilara's back bowed again, this time with a different cry. Raw, triumphant, the sound of a mother meeting her child. The birth was sudden, fierce, perfect. A boy slid into Thorn's waiting hands first, slick, squalling, fists already clenched like he was ready to fight the world. Lucian severed the cord with a claw, voice shaking with awe. Ilara reached with the last of her strength, and they laid the child on her chest. Skin to skin, heart to breaking heart. The baby quieted instantly, tiny starfish hands splaying over her collarbone as if to say, I'm here, Mama. We made it. He had Thorn's mouth and Lucian's eyes, gold-ringed in storm grey. And when he opened them, the room filled with soft dawn-colored light that had no source at all. Outside, wolves began to howl, not in grief but in wonder. The dark moon had ended. A new one, small, fierce and luminous, had been born instead. Ilara looked at the 2 men who'd carried her across fire and poison and centuries of hate and smiled through tears that finally had permission to fall. His name, she whispered, is Orin, Dawnbringer. Thorn kissed her temple, shaking with silent sobs. Lucian bowed over her hand and wept without sound. King brought low and made whole. Above the stronghold, the sky cracked open. The first sliver of the new moon appeared. Not silver, but the tender gold of beginnings, and every wolf in the united packs lifted their voices until the mountains themselves trembled. The long schism was over. Love, messy, impossible, absolute, had won. And in the quiet that followed, 3 hearts beat beneath one small, perfect light that belonged to all of them. Forever. The Dawnbearer has been born. But the story isn't over. Not even close. If your heart is still racing, if you laughed, cried, screamed, and fell in love with Alara, Thorn, Lucian, and little Orin, then I need you right now. And drop your favorite moment in the comments, the one that wrecked you the most, the cave in the storm, the moment 2 alphas knelt together, the birth under the new golden moon. Tell me which scene lives rent-free in your head. And then do this. Smash that hot react button so hard the moon goddess feels it. Share this story with the one friend who needs a love that burns down kingdoms and rebuilds them stronger. Reply with more if you're begging for a season 2, because enemies older than the schism are already stirring. And Orin's light just painted a target on all their backs. Let's make this legend echo across every pack. Who's ready for what comes after the dawn? Drop your howl below. And if you cried at the ending, you're not alone. I'm still not recovered either.